General Protocol Spaces, banking on freedom.
All right, so let's get started. Welcome back to the nth edition of General Bullshit. We're just going to talk about things that are interesting to General Protocols, interesting to us, that we think are important for Bitcoin Cash. And today we have a very interesting topic. So how should I pronounce your name, actually, Giviz?
Giviz is fine.
Giviz, all right. So he's been in BCH for a long time and is working on something, and he agreed to share a short description of it. And then there's a specific problem that he's working on that I think is very relevant to Bitcoin Cash and general protocols and everybody in the ecosystem, which is it's a very tough problem of digital and cryptographic identity and trust. So we'll spend some time on that, maybe, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes and see where it goes. And then we'll move on to other topics like chip process and the current chips that are out there that are in a pretty advanced stage. And we'll see where it goes from there. So Giviz, could you share your short introduction about what you're doing and what the problem you're facing is?
Yeah, sure. So I posted the introduction, so I guess some of you have already read it. The problem we are working on is to have a wallet with applications inside that is very easy to use for like random user, not people like us, but more people like my wife that want to use something but really doesn't want to learn anything new to use it. And the identity, and particularly the username, is really a big part of it. Each time I try to show her a Bitcoin Cash address or even an EVM address, it's over. It's way too complicated for her. So we are trying to find a system where we can have a username, but not in domain name or DNS system. So far we have tried something with EVM, and we are going to explore things with cash tokens to see if there is a solution that would be better for this kind of integration.
Yeah, right. And I read you shared a repository with me about some of your plans for doing the identity, and we discussed some of the issues. Right, and there's a lot of issues. Do you have a kind of an outline, like a list of the major difficulties with digital identity? Because I guess for many people, if you haven't thought about it a lot or thought about it deeply, digital identity seems very simple. Like you just have even if you understand cryptography, it still seems very simple. Like, okay, I have a public key or something like that, or I have an account. Just doesn't seem very complicated, but what is it that's difficult? What are the hard parts of it?
Really, the hard part is if you are in an application and you search for another user, like you are on Twitter and you search for me, you don't know if it's me. You see Giviz, but is it me? Is it the Giviz you know, or is it someone else who created an account with the same username Giviz? So the approach we thought about was to have one set of username in the system. And if you want to register an username on our platform, you will have to either use a long username, like 15 characters, or a short username, but you would have to prove that you own this username on Web2 platforms like Twitter, Instagram, or maybe you own the domain name. So you have to have some checks about who is allowed to register a certain username. Otherwise, I can just install the wallet and, for example, register the username Binance and say, yeah, I'm Binance. You can trust me, I'm Binance. And obviously, it's going to be very bad for every user in the system. So the difficulty is really there. How can you restrict a username to someone? I can say who own it, because obviously you never own it on Twitter or Instagram or this kind of platforms. but already use it and has some kind of identity already tied to it, if that makes sense.
Yes, so you'd say that's the main difficulty is bridging between I call them custodial accounts, right? Like a Twitter or top level domains, or that's a website address, or GitHub. Those are custodial accounts. They determine who you are and who owns your account.
But you also have to check that it's at least some legit use of these accounts. For example, you cannot check just who owns a .com domain, because 90% of the .com domain are just parked. And you will not want to give someone the username for a parked domain, because you are not solving any problem if you do that.
Yeah. Okay. So are you're saying though that's the main difficulty is bridging the custodial domains and the non-custodial domains?
For me,
accounts, identities, and non-custodial identities.
Yeah, because once you have the verification and you know that if you search for me on a platform and it's the same GVs that it's on Twitter and someone checked this, at least you can move the problem on who checked it, and not it can be, for example, the application checked the credential on the other platforms, but the user knows there is some level of control. And I would say that for small user, let's say like me on Twitter, you can do just a minimum amount of control. But obviously, for big entities like Binance, you will have to do a lot of control. You check the domain name, you check the Twitter, you check the Instagram, and so on. You're sure you've given this username to the right person. After that, you just have to type the username to the metadata with something like cash token or EVM. It's relatively easy.
Okay, so yeah, that's a very big open-ended problem, connecting custodial and non-custodial, or even two different non-custodial platforms is also difficult. Even if you start from a non-custodial and then bridging that to another non-custodial, and what do you do when the state diverges between those two? That's a very big open question. But what about on the non-custodial side? So what is it that you're planning for identity, and like how you would like it to work? And then I'd really like to hear why you guys are considering using cash tokens instead of an EVM, because that's an interesting topic that many people have asked. Like, why would I use cash tokens instead of EVM? So I'd like to hear what you guys think about that.
Okay, so the way we want to store the identity is more like when we did it with EVM, it's you register your username, and then you can register addresses like your Bitcoin Cash address, your EVM address, and so on. So it's easier to match them, and only you can do this. But the issue with EVM, it's very expensive to use and not really easy to scale. It's one of also the main issue. From the test we've done with cash tokens, it's a lot more smooth to manipulate it. And also, I think there is ways to, at least to explore, to do it with cash tokens that doesn't require someone to write and deploy a contract like you will do on EVM, which will probably give you more control over the system because you own the contract, and also can introduce a ton of bugs because the contract is going to be custom made and probably more complicated than you think it will be, because each corner case will introduce some level of difficulty. And I think with cash tokens, if we can manage to get this to work, it will be a lot more robust because you don't have to code anything. You just have to use the system in the right way.
So at the beginning, it sounded like cost is one part of it. Just the difficulty to use is cost, and that's not only Ethereum. You are saying that for generally for EVMs, or is that especially for Ethereum, or?
For Ethereum, it's already out of the possibilities because you cannot pay like $5 to register each user. It's going to be really not practical because you have to pay to register the user. You have to make one transaction, and then you have to pay if the user wants to, let's say, register a new address, and so on and so on. So it's way too expensive. On smaller EVMs, like for example EOS EVMs, it's more practical. But it's more practical because they are not really used right now. Obviously, if they start to scale, the same issue is going to appear down the line. So the cost is obviously an issue.
I see. Yeah, that's the reason General Protocols is building on Bitcoin Cash, among other reasons, is that we think it's the only one that has a chance that we know that will be programmable and also remain scalable. But so the solutions with sharding and other EVMs, taking other scaling approaches, especially sharding, do you think that's going to result in something useful? Keep it?
No, from my opinion, no, because all this the layer 2 we see just add more level of intermediaries. Now you have to trust way and way more systems. It's also slower. It's also more error prone. I think, especially for this kind of system with identity, the simpler the better. And Cash Tokens is very simple. So if there is a way to make it work with this system, it's way better than to try to build things on top of each other to have something that doesn't work and try to make it to work. With a layer 2, layer 3, layer 4, and I don't know how many layers they are planning to add.
Okay, yeah, this is the same for us. Keep it simple, keep it fast and robust. Yeah, very simple. I mean, very, very similar reasons for us to build on Bitcoin Cash as well.
Yeah, for sure. I really understand why everyone has been building on the EVM so far, because it's really like using MySQL instead of Redis, for example.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's a lot simpler. It's also a lot more expensive and a lot easier to do things, but it's a lot simpler. So the simple path is always the one that people are going to take. But I don't think it's the right path. It's way harder to scale. I'd rather use Redis than MySQL, personally.
For me, it feels like the very, very early days of personal computer programming, when everything's global, everything's in global scope. There's no such thing as a scope. And it's like, well, yeah, it's easy until you want to do anything else interesting. Yeah. Okay. All right. I was hoping, so we have Jonathan here, and imagine a username, and Jonathan has developed standards, right, for Cash ID and implemented apps to demonstrate it. There's the BitcoinCashResearch.org, where you can make an account, cryptographic account, Cash ID account, without needing to sign up with email. So there's there's active websites that have a lot of users that already implement this kind of ID system or identity system. And then there's he also made the Cash Accounts standard, which allows you to have human readable names attached to other details. So, but when we talked offline, you were saying that those don't quite meet the needs of what you have. So could you say a little bit about or actually Jonathan, could you describe those two things that you have, Cash ID and Cash Accounts, and then could you say what's the gap? Like, what is it that you need that's not there already?
Sure.
After that.
Sure. Though I think I've already heard one of the gaps. So I'll start there. So you talked a moment ago about bridging custodial and non-custodial identities, like making a verification system to connect the two worlds. And neither of my protocols have that as an aim or a goal, and don't support that in any way at all. So that's a dead end on my side. Now, what do my two protocols do? So I'll start with the cash account, which is the most successful of the two. So cash accounts is a way to register a transaction on the blockchain with a name and some kind of payload, specifically a payment information payload. And then after the transaction has been mined in a block, you are given an identity that consists of your name and a few human-readable numbers afterwards to disambiguate if other people would like to use the same name. So, for example, if you want to send me money on Bitcoin Cash, there are many wallets that use cash accounts today, where you can just type in Jonathan #100, and that'll be my payment information. And if you send money there, it goes to me. Cash ID is different in that it doesn't try to do identity entirely. Like, it doesn't try to form identity or construct. It does authentication of identity. So if you say in one context that I am this public key, public key is going to represent me. For example, when you go to a new website and you want to create an account on that website, you would generate a public key for that website, hand it over and say, hey, this is going to be me moving forward. And then whenever you want to authenticate and prove that you are still you, the website issues a challenge request. Your phone scans a simple QR code or similar and uses the private key to sign that request. It's a very, very old thing that goes back all the way to Squirrel, 90-something, early 90s. And it's also seen incarnations in Bitcoin in terms of BitID, and there are plenty of other things too. What distinguishes Cash ID from these previous attempts is that it recognizes that those who must implement it are service providers, like websites having these services they want to offer you where you have a login need or authentication need. And today, with existing standards, they have no benefit of switching over. If their databases get breached and they lose all the passwords for their users, then the users are losing, and at worst they take a reputational hit, but that is a cost that from a human perspective is very hard to consider. So what Cash ID does differently is that it adds user-provided metadata in order to create a better user experience. So when you want to create an account at some place, then the normal approach is that they'll ask you for an email and a password. And after you've given that, they give you a new form and say, hey, what's your name? Where do you live? Or other questions they might have about you to set up your profile. Now, with Cash ID, requests for that metadata of all that metadata can be included in the initial request, including the request to create a new account. So you'd go to a website, and you have a little QR code in the top right corner for either login or register. It's the same QR code, essentially. You scan it, and then you on your phone, you just say, yeah, I want to share these things with the website, and say yes. And now you have an account, they have the metadata, and the next time you need to log in, you scan the QR code and say it's me. So that's what Cash ID is.
Okay. Cash ID seems a lot harder to use for a normal user, especially if you have to scan a QR code and you are on mobile. It's very difficult to do. But I looked into cash accounts because it's more popular, like you said. And for me, one of the first things that is a blocking factor is the account name format. The fact that you have to use I think it's hyphen in English, the symbol. The fact that you have to use this symbol is problematic because it's not something that users are used to. This symbol is not used in username for any platform. It's not used on Twitter. It's not used on Instagram. It's not used on email, domain names, nothing. So it's kind of problematic. The fact that you have to have a number in your username is also problematic because most of us doesn't use number in usernames. So users are not used to this. What I like about this system is that you can translate from an account name to an address. And I thought about it yesterday evening, and I thought that maybe if you could translate from an account to a token ID, it will be maybe more useful, because with the token ID and the BCMR protocol, you could manage your own data just by moving your NFT. So you will have a username that will point to your token category, that will store your BCMR metadata, and you will move this to move your to change your information. But sorry.
Can I jump in here before you?
Yeah,
add?
sure. Yeah, sure.
So, the protocol was explicitly limited in the first incarnation because I didn't know how to specify like all the code folding problems in Unicode and how to make sure that usernames don't overlap with others. So that's why it has strict usernames. But that is a limitation that it's easier to lift it than restrict it afterwards. So essentially, if you want to have a hyphen in your username, what's needed is an update to the standardization to like version 1.1 that allows for more types of characters in the name, while still remaining valid for that version. As for the token part, yes, we did not have tokens when I was building this.
Sure.
And I agree with you. Tokenization of an identity allows you to manage your identity with that token is a great thing. One of the drawbacks of cash account is the inability to manage it, to revoke it, to change it, to update it. But with tokens, that becomes possible. Now, if you look at the cash account standard, there are 4 payloads for direct payments and 4 tokenized versions of those payloads. But there are 256 possible types of payloads where the vast majority are not documented. And so if the protocol otherwise is good enough to use, one could just extend the protocol and say that, hey, we're going to use number 17 for this kind of payload. And then you put a payload that relates to tokenized identity in there, and suddenly the protocol works for that. All this said, you are right in that the number that comes after the username is somewhat long, and not everyone is going to prefer that solution over others. That was my trade-off in order to kind of address the Zocco's triangle dilemma when it comes to usability. So, yeah, okay.
Yeah, for sure. From your point of view, I completely understand why you made it that way. I think it will be nice if the symbol and the number will at least not be required for the first person who registered the username. And maybe if you want to register and the same username, you would have to add something on top of it. But at least I could register my username, Jivit, without having to modify it, because people are really attached to a specific username. I mean, most of us use the same username everywhere. So you don't want to change it to register on a new platform. And most platforms use the same. I looked into most platforms, and usually if you use lowercase letter, all platforms are non-case sensitive. And you can use A to Z, O to 9, and usually you have underscore, period, and hyphen. That's it. I thought about something else.
There have been discussions about how to implement a numberless version using the cash account protocol as it exists, where you say that the first one that gets registered, if there are no one to compete for it, or the first one is the one you want, you just use it. It's technically doable, but validation of it, like or making sure that the account matches the expected payload, it becomes significantly harder without an indexing service. One of the key values of the protocol as it is right now is that an SPV wallet that does not have an indexing service, they can actually just take the number, figure out which block it is, request the respective transactions, and parse it out in a relatively short amount of time. Now, if you have an indexing service, there are more things you can do. And there are indexing services out there. All this said, cash account is limited in scope, and if you can do something better that is more successful and makes it easier for people to access crypto, pay with crypto, and manage their identities, I'd be more than happy to switch over and use something else. So I wish you good luck.
For sure, I'm not saying I can do something better than cash account at this stage. I'm just saying at this stage, it's hard for us to choose to use cash accounts for the reason I've stated. But there is another reason we talked about just before, is that if I register the cash account, for example, let's say I could register a cash account without the constraints, so no symbol and no numbers, I register GVs, we still fall back to the previous issue. Am I GVs? So we haven't solved the problem that we can't show the user GVs in our application because we don't know if it's the same GVs people are going to think about when they search for him in the application. So we still have to have some level of verification if we want to use this system. I think it's a nice way to let's say, embed in the blockchain the fact that this username is going to match to this token ID and move the identity this way. But to show the username in the application, we still don't know if it's a scam or not. You can take all my information and you can register a cash account with my name and my Twitter, my YouTube, and so on. Pretend that you are me, and if we just show this username in the user list in the application, it's really problematic. So we still have to find a way to have some level of control over this.
So, Gibbies, we talked about this a little bit in text, so it wasn't much detail, but the feeling that I get from, because we have thought about these problems and you have thought about them, but the deep feeling I have from what you describe is that your team will become the custodians of these identities. Effectively, you become the custodians because you are deciding how to translate from custodial systems to non-custodial. And then also, you also have to decide after it becomes non-custodial, how do you maintain the link, or do you maintain the link between the custodial and the non-custodial setups? So my deep feeling is that you are trying to solve an impossible problem of linking the two. It feels like you need to establish what's the ground truth, and then you can't change from that. If the ground truth is custodial systems, then you need some algorithm. And then how does that change over time? You become the custodian of the process of change of algorithm to decide who is the owner of Gibbies. And or you decide, look, they're just not going to be connected. The ground truth is the non-custodial side. But am I missing something? Like, what's how do you handle this complexity of the custodianship of the process or the algorithm? Or
I completely agree with you. It's where the difficulty is, because we don't want to be the custodial. So with an EVM contract, we will. It's still at the stage we are still brainstorming it. It's not implemented. So we would have made some verification. Check your Twitter account, your Instagram account. Okay, you control this username, so we give you the possibility to register it, and then you own it. We cannot do anything with it. If we move to a system with cash tokens, for example, that will be more a system where, for example, you can register your username. So anyone can register the username he wants, but you have to be included inside, for example, our application registry or another application registry, or many application registries, and application could use those registries to compile a list of verified users by many applications. So it will be more a system where you don't have one entity like us that verify and say, yeah, you exist, you don't exist, you exist, you don't exist. But the user could have the ability to use multiple registries and compile them into one. I agree. We keep moving the can down the road, but we have to move it somewhere at some point, because if you display usernames and if there is a usernames, people, normal user, like for example my wife, is going to relate them from a username in the Web2 space. They are not going to make a mental shift. Yeah, it's a completely different system. If they see a user named Binance, they are going to think, yeah, it's Binance, because they are so used to work like this mentally that we have to find a system that works in this way, but that doesn't place us at the custodial of everyone, for sure. It's not the goal.
I see. So not as custodians, but as a kind of a personal view of the non-custodial accounts. There's all the non-custodial stuff that's registered, and then you provide your view of it, your company's view or your team's view of who is legit within.
Yeah,
all
that's
the
why we could use multiple of these registries, like it's done with BCMR.
Right.
There is multiple registries that index the blockchain data. So we could have our registry, maybe a registry made by Peitaka and you, and application could read from all the registries and try to figure out what to present to the user.
Right. So then you could, like a good registry maybe would publish in a hashed format, provable format. Like, this is our policy for how we determine who the current owner of this account is, and you could have some kind of published process where people could review it and say, oh, okay, that sounds reasonable, or something.
For example,
like that might be nice. Yeah.
For example, you could register your cash account, point it to your token ID, and manage your own identity. But it's not going to show up in any application. Then you use our application and you do some kind of verification. You verify your Twitter account and your Instagram account, for example. And you use another application, for example, Peitaka Wallet, and maybe you do some other kind of verification. And we try to combine all those verification to say, okay, imaginary is this one. We show this one to the users. So I'm still brainstorming the stuff. I don't say I know. It has to be done this way, of course.
What about the possibility of like a little bit of a hybrid where on the bottom level every account is not squattable? It is a non-custodial, not squattable account, because I personally, I just hate the squattable systems. But that brings in numbers and stuff like that. But if you had, for example, something like cash accounts on the bottom layer, but then your registry could say, look, this is the first one in history that was registered with Giviz. And there's other ones after it, but they have to be identified. But this is the one that's actually identified as Giviz. The first one that is registered, that was created and is verified, is this one. So when it appears in our registry, it has the name Giviz, and the others have to have numbers or something like that. I don't know. Maybe you can have a combination.
Yeah, I think it's the same problem, because if you do that and your system start to have some traction, squatters are going to register every big name like Binance or everything they could use later on and say, yeah, we are the first, so we are Binance now. So
well, I was saying the first one that's verified, the one that actually verifies against. Yeah. But then the problem is if that one loses the verification, the connection gets lost. The top level domain is lost. It's forgotten and didn't get renewed, or or the account got canceled by Twitter or taken over by Twitter or whatever, then what happens? Yeah, I don't know. You've got a kind of a bottomless problem connecting.
Yeah, sure. I agree. It's not the perfect solution, but there is no perfect solution.
Yeah. But you're trying to bridge it in some practical way. That's very cool. It's a very, very hard problem.
It's more that I'm trying to solve the issue for the user who is going to think that way. It's not that I want the identity from Web2 to go to Web3. It's more like people are going to expect that and think that way. And if the system is not built with that in mind, it's going to be a lot easier to scan them. Because we could have thought about a completely different system where I have to give you something, for example, by email, you enter it into your application, and by some mechanism, we start to be connected. You have my identity, I have your identity, and there is no, even no username. You can name me whatever you want, like when you add someone in the phone number of someone in your phone, you put the name you want. Usually you put his name, but you can put my friend, for example, and his phone number. And there is no central username system. The drawback with that is it's not the way users are used to interact nowadays in most platforms. You search for someone, you have a list of users, and you pick, it's this one, it's his picture, it's its name. So I will ask him to be friends, for example. But
so how about this for something to think about? So imagine you make a wallet, and in that wallet you list 5 different identity verification services. And when you type in something like a cash account, you start typing Givez, it gives you a drop-down list because it asks these 5 services, like, hey, for this account, like, what externally verified identities do you have for me? And they give back like, Givez on Twitter made a tweet, here's the link to it with this cryptographically proved link to this cash account. And then the drop-down list would show the Twitter account in your wallet. So you type Givez and you click on it's the Twitter Givez, the one I know on Twitter.
Well, that's a good idea where the drop-down could also be sorted by how many verifications you have. So you have Givez, and then it has a little Twitter icon, and it has a GitHub icon, and it has a Reddit icon or something like that. And you could be like, this one. I mean, that's also gameable, but
interacted with previously first.
Yeah, okay, that too.
But you still have someone who have to make the verification and say, okay, this user has been verified for Twitter and so on in the system.
Yeah, and that would be the value that your registry would be providing. Yeah,
because in a way, I also think, just to close on this, I also think it would be nice to have a way for a user of the system to give feedback. Okay, I'm interacting with, for example, Givez, and I see there is an issue. It doesn't seem right. And to provide feedback in the other way for the many registries to know that users start to have issue with this user. Maybe someone bought the account, for example, and to react in the fact that maybe we should disable this user and ask him to remake the verification. I think it should probably go both ways to be efficient.
Oh man, anything that's not immutable, that just gets into such a hairy problem. Okay, so that's good. Wow, we actually talked quite a long time about this. It's much longer than I thought. I hope people are still following, and it's an interesting topic. It's very interesting for us because it's very difficult, and like Givez has said, it's a practical problem as well as a technical problem, and a human factors problem. So it's very interesting and very difficult, and nobody has really sorted this out in a very reasonable way yet, in my opinion. But this kind of gets to the whole even deeper issue of web of trust. how do you establish trust? How do you establish, some facts about identity and so forth? It's all very interesting and difficult stuff, but yeah, it's things that we have to work on, and I'm happy to see it getting worked on in a practical way. So, Givis, thank you for joining us. You're welcome to just stay on if you want, but I'd like to move on to some other topics, just so that we have a little bit of additional discussion. I was hoping to get a little bit of a statement from, like a summary from Imaginary Username about, so there's the chip process, which General Protocols has posted a short video, an article that kind of summarizes the chip process. So that's something we won't go into. We've gone into it before. But if you don't know about the chip process, definitely go check the General Protocols Twitter, and you will find it recently in the history. But then there's the specific chips, the cache improvement proposals that are going through the process. And we have, as General Protocols, we have an opinion on them, and just wanted to talk a little bit about where they are and where we think they are, and where some of the upcoming ones or the other ones that are on the table, like what's going on with them. So, Yunim, could you give us a little say about how General Protocols, yourself and General Protocols, see the chips that are out there right now?
You mean all of them, or the specific ones that that has a very good chance of being implemented and adopted this November?
Greatest hits. Yeah. Or your favorites. I don't know. Yeah. So there's the block size, there's the math ops, there's VM limits. Those are the three obvious ones, I think, to mention. But any others? I don't know. At least those three, I guess.
Well, those three are on the top of probably I would say on the top of the list, with one of them specifically standing out more than others. But yeah, there are others. There are oodles of them actually, and they're kind of all boiling under the surface. So we might as well just go for the top guys.
Yeah, let's start there. Let's go there.
Yeah, so I will probably want to mention again the adaptive block size proposal that is currently going through the pipes and is written up largely by Bitcoin Cash Autist, who was here like 20 minutes ago, but it's no longer here. I suppose if he ever wants to speak, we can summon him again, but probably not. Anyway, so that one has gone around because it has been boiling in BCH for a long time. Actually, I would say, I mean, ever since 2017 will be accurate, but it was getting especially more intense in the recent few years. That people are worried that BCH might. On one hand, people are worried that BCH might go down the paths of freaking BTC when the time comes to increase block size, because we have always thought of ourselves as, we got way more than enough than block space right now, and when the adoption actually comes, we'll just increase it. Then no big deal. But a lot of that is just hand wavy, and not that much I've thought has been given to how it would actually happen when the time comes, because the whole when the time comes thing is not just a technical thing, right? I mean, we all know what happened the last time Satoshi said, oh, we can just do it like this, and it didn't exactly happen that way. So we have to consider a lot of things, not just the technical way of how to increase the block size, but also the social aspects of it. What would be the least friction way? What would would give merchants and users and developers the most confidence, and how to balance out the risk. And unlike what a lot of the I would say absolutist or purist would argue. I would say that there are real risks involved if you just go all in the very beginning and say that we'll just take that number off and everything will be all right. Everything is not all right. So I think this I have read the proposal. Again, Bitcoin Cash Artist is probably the better guy to explain it, but I would say that it is a good balance of those that allows the max block size to go up as demand goes up, and it addresses all the things that people can think of. Where if you have short-term spam, what happens? It shouldn't cause extraneous burdens. If you have what happens when demand increases real quick? How to balance between predictability and the spike in usage? It's not perfect, but it does cover pretty much everything and strikes a good balance. So
I think it's worth mentioning that there's no such thing as perfect, right? Unless you can perfectly predict the future.
Yeah, exactly. And and the thing is that the alternative of perfect is to do nothing. Hey, Bitcoin Cash Artist, welcome back. If you ever want to speak, I don't know if you want to. Feel free to ping us.
I'm gonna be his medium. He can Ouija board me. Oh.
Sure. But yeah, we have to always consider the alternative. The alternative is the alternative of a imperfect trade-off solution is to do nothing, and doing nothing has its own risk. So we have to always consider that.
Yeah, and recently we posted, right? General Protocols posted the opinion that it's been through enough. It's been beat down and reformed and crucibled and steel manned and everything enough times that it's to the point that it's like, okay, this is, like you said, this is in a very rigorous way good enough. Like it's been hit from every angle that people can think of, and Bitcoin Cash Artist has responded tirelessly to all of those angles, and some of them he included in some minor modifications to it, and some of them just said, no, that's not the right way to go, or whatever it is. But yeah, he's been through a huge amount of feedback and revision over, as you said, the idea itself, and then Bitcoin Cash Artist proposal itself has been through a lot of revisions and improvements.
Yep. I mean, it's again, there's always room for improvement. I mean, we probably haven't consulted every possible Bitcoin Cash users and developers, both on the surface and below, and all the way out in the reaches of everywhere. The actual number of people asked is probably not that high by, I don't know, U.S. Constitution standards, among other things. But I think it's gone through a reasonable process, at least in my personal opinion.
Yeah, I love how much feedback it's got for people who don't understand chip process or just think it's a name or whatever. You should really go look at some of these chips and see how much feedback and how much
the cash tokens ones is a particularly good example.
It's insane. Yeah, how much feedback has been pulled from the wide ecosystem on it. And we had one example of a very a good actor, a reputable a reputable actor, Nikita from Blockchair, who came at Cash Tokens a little bit after the fact, and he's like, but why did you do it this way? You should have blah blah blah. And it was like, dude, we were talking about this, and we collected feedback, and I was like, okay, you should come in and look at the next ones, right, before they actually go in, and make sure to get your feedback. And I'm trying to get him in here to talk about it, right, because we really want as much feedback as possible, and to get the big brains, not just dunking on other siblings in the Bitcoin family, but to build, right? It's a different thing to dunk and to be right, and then to actually build. They're two different things. So I'd love to have as many people come in and talk. And you can do that if you're listening and you're interested. You can go to bitcoincashresearch.org and talk, or you can find Bitcoin Cash Autist on Twitter or other places and have a talk with them. So yeah, it's I love seeing the chip process move, and the best ideas rise to the top, as opposed to the loudest ideas rising to the top. Okay, cool. What about the other chips on the table?
Yeah. There are a couple other ones that have recently picked up some interest, but I personally, well, I mean, there's still a chance. It's not like there's never a chance. But I personally believe that it is at too early a stage to be included in the May 2024 upgrade. So it will probably have to go through the gauntlet next cycle, which can begin as early as possible. Might as well be now. But one of them is the additional mass opcode chip, which Matthew still around? Nope. But anyway, which Matthew has written, that addresses a developer usability issue in the Bitcoin Cash script, because we now have introspection and we now have cash tokens, which makes programming a lot of smart contracts that is unique to Bitcoin Cash a lot easier. And people are doing it. People are making dexes, and people are making standards like BCMR, which is very unique to Bitcoin Cash, and I think it's valuable. But using all of this requires that you do math, and some of the maths are not as easy as people think it is. They are not so straightforward, and I encourage interested people to go look at it, to go look at the chip, which describes it in detail. But long story short, the chip proposes some additional opcodes to address the problem of simplifying the math and make it a lot easier for developers. And there is currently I think there is increasing interest, and many people. And I think so far, people who have shown interest in it has largely agreed that there's something to be done there, but it is not settled on exactly which opcodes to add yet. So yeah, for people interested in it, please jump in. And then there is the increase virtual machine limit chip, which is pretty straightforward. A transaction input can currently only take so many opcodes, and push and have a certain limit in terms of how big a stack it can push. So while cash tokens gave us a way to abstract things, the Bitcoin Cash way, and so one way to get around it is to break your thing down into multiple interacting scripts, which can go a very long way. That is a roundabout way, and people would probably still find it easier to have simply a bigger limit. And it's on the table. I think a lot of, I think especially the increasing the increasingly visible cash tokens ecosystem would appreciate that. But increasing limits here, just like increasing limits anywhere else, is not we need a bigger number, let's put a bigger number there kind of thing. You need to consider why the original limit was there in the first place, and did you address those concerns, and did you address any new concerns that might have popped up? aka, is it safe? That is also an ongoing process that needs to be addressed. Matthew has done some work on it earlier than him. Jason Dreisner has done even more work on that and written up a pretty detailed chip. So I also encourage people to go look at it and put your input and put your feedback in. Should it be increased, or is it better for people to just work around it using cash tokens? If it should be, how much should it be? Things like that. Yeah.
Okay, very cool. I'm trying to multitask here and list up some of these in the thread on Twitter, the links to the relevant stuff that we're talking about. Wasn't there one other chip that's interesting about what was it? Yeah, about is there even like a chip out there, or is it still just discussion about a common way to do UTXO commitments? Sorry, to do the
Yes. Unfortunately, I don't think it is. There was a proto chip that's written up in terms of the algorithm that that Bitcoin Verde has implemented, and that is a super cool thing. I encourage people to go look at it. The problem with that chip, of course, is that it describes the algorithm of how to calculate the commitment, but it is incomplete. It is incomplete, not just in the usual Udim and emergent reasons are hunting you down because your chip is not consulting wide enough people or wide enough set of people, or addressing like this or that concerns. You are not giving you are not giving enough consideration to alternative. No, it's not just that. It also doesn't address some of the things to core to what people usually think of as part of UTXO commitments, and not just on top of not considering enough the alternatives. So some of those are like, okay, you got a way to calculate the commitments. Cool. How often do you want to do it? And then okay. So it's sort of a soft fork. Exactly how are you going to activate this? Exactly how are you going to activate this? How is the UTXO set going to be passed around for it to be useful, for fasting people? Do we just do the Verde implementation, or do we do some more clever thing for that to be useful? And how do people roll back? That kind of thing. It's not as simple as we calculate a commitment. There's a string that you can compare UTXO set to, and then it matches. Voila! Everyone's happy forever after. It's not that simple. And there are a few people who have expressed interest in it, which is good, but we also need more. And that is an essential step on the way to very high scalability. Without it, syncing nodes will become practically impossible when we get to very large block sizes. So I also encourage people to take closer looks at it, especially for people who at least have a faint idea about what a UTXO commitment is. Your input is desperately needed.
Yeah, and to Nikita out there, who I hope is going to listen to this at some point, that's another one where we would love to have feedback from, builders who have experience in, working on things at scale and what the issues are. And I really want to emphasize that last point, that similar to the max block size, like just being able to increase not only the max block size, but the whole infrastructure that supports it and makes it possible to actually work with larger blocks is an absolutely essential issue to scaling, which everybody has known, but we're finally actually taking steps to commit to that publicly, right? Like, hey, look, now it's built in the consensus that we are really clearly committed to growing. And this UTXO commitments is the idea that you don't have to have, as a user, or as a common, economic node, you don't have to have the whole historical chain to operate, and you can do that in a way that doesn't sacrifice. It's not like you're just faking it and you have some custodial point that you start from. There's a reasonable and good way to do it where you can fully validate everything. And still be scalable. And that's like Uname said, a very important part to massive scale, but it's harder to understand than max block size. So that's very important, and figuring that out early. So Uname, do you think that's as equally important to solve as early as possible as it is that we're working on max block size? Or do you think that's something we can take longer to figure out? Or
So the thing about this is kind of tricky. So the longer it takes us to do this, the longer the blockchain freaking builds up, and that is not nice. We also one thing that I like to talk repeatedly over and over again when describing the chip process is that we'll also need to give confidence to people. And not taking this important step, it erodes confidence. People will be like, okay, sure, you guys are sort of committing with an adjustable block size, but on the technical side, you guys are dragging your feet on this one very important thing. Do the work, show some work, man, or else I'm not gonna make the necessary investment. And that is a valid criticism. But on the other hand, it is also important to get this right, because it's not, if it's the kind of thing where it's difficult to revert later if you implement it shoddily without giving it much thought. So it's also important to get it right, and there's a balance to be struck there. And obviously, we ain't gonna wait forever for some magical unicorn thing to just appear out of the other side of the rainbow or something. There is a balance to be struck there.
There's a balance. Yeah, there's work left to be done. I have seen occasionally people say like, "Oh, Cash tokens was the last big upgrade that Bitcoin Cash will need," and it's like, no, we still have some pretty heavy hitters that are needed to get the global scale.
I guess people have different ideas about what a big upgrade is. In a sense, Cash tokens might actually be the last and quote unquote greatest consensus upgrade Bitcoin Cash has, because of how much space it opens up. But in terms of complexity, or even however you measure the importance, it might not be the last one. The only reason people people think it might be, the last and greatest is because things like UTXO commitment is like, okay, it solves the problem. But people are like, oh, what does it solve? Scalability. Okay, great. Does it allow me to make tokens? Not really. Okay, so am I going to be able to make tokens to shield on somewhere and make a lot of money? No, that's not what it does. Okay, screw it. I'm not interested. You guys do your thing. So I think it's that kind of mentality.
Right.
But just because it doesn't allow you to make it doesn't open you up to novel kinds of Doge tokens, doesn't mean that it's not important, right?
So I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that 2 years from now, I'm pretty confident that people have explored the Cash token ecosystem significantly enough, and there's going to be another ship with another, like, let's improve the virtual machine in this way, because they'll find edges they want to fix. But yeah, it's a big thing. Now, for the people who say Cash tokens might be the last thing they need, well, if you look at it, you can kind of break down the Bitcoin Cash setup into multiple parts. And from the virtual machine perspective, it's very, very dynamic and can do a lot of things now. So they might not need more virtual machine changes, or at least they might not think they do. Eventually it hits a limit and they'll want the targeted VM limit chip to come through. But from the network perspective, we're absolutely not at a point where we've reached completion, so to speak. It's a lot of work to do there still.
Yeah, both. Well, as we were discussing on, in our opinion, right? We aren't some authority. We are just our opinion, but in our opinion, I think shared, there's a bit more consensus work to do to make sure we can actually reach global scale, which is the commitment I think we want to make, right? Commitment, public, credible commitment that we're not just talking about it, but we're doing everything we can to actually make it happen. Yeah. I did want to mention one thing. So Bitcoin Cash Altus sent me a message. He was saying the math chip that we were talking about, that he and Matthew proposed, is it's about usability and also about safety, like not making it so that developers have to do complicated things, because when you do complicated things in a very strict programming environment that's open-ended, a lot of people are going to make mistakes. Even experienced people are going to make mistakes. So it's about convenience, it's about safety. But he wanted to add that it's also just about exposing the capabilities and just making the VM as powerful as it can be without having some artificial limits put on it. So yeah, so he wanted to add that there's even a little bit more to it. And then on the flip side, Matthew sent me a message that he said they're going to implement these because he thinks it still needs work. It needs a lot of work. It's not ready yet. But he said CashScript is going to implement. CashScript is the compiler for Bitcoin Cash smart contracts, or one compiler for it. And he said they're going to implement these kind of virtual opcodes where you can do this kind of math, but you let the compiler sort out how to do it in a safe way for you, instead of requiring an opcode. So of course that's takes space and takes transaction size and processing power, whatnot, but fundamentally achieves the same thing, at least temporarily, until they sort out what exactly it is that would really be the best set of things to add. So I like that. It's a good intermediate approach. And General Protocols, we had to do the same thing. Even though we wanted introspection several years ago, we published a public article that said, out of anybody in the world, we want introspection more than anyone else, because it would massively simplify any hedge and how it works. But it's not ready, so let's not do that yet. That would be a bad idea to rush it. So I really appreciate that they're taking it very seriously and trying to make sure they consider all angles and then find ways to get around it in the meantime, which is what we had to do at General Protocols too. We had to, oh man, that contract was complex. We did our best to make it safe, and I think it was, but it was it was complex, and introspection made it so much simpler. So these math opcodes will expose some of that power too, and make it safe and simple. I think, yeah, we've been on for, wow, a long time, an hour and 15. So maybe we'll cut it off here, perhaps. Givys, was there something you wanted to say or anything to wrap up about the identity or any of the topics we've been covering? Or
no, I'm good. I'm still thinking about it. Maybe we can have another session in a few weeks when I will have more time to play with Cache Token and have more to say.
Yeah, good luck with ground truth. What a difficult concept.
Yeah.
And let me invite, if anybody has some projects that they were looking for feedback, maybe next time we can discuss some of that. We'll see. Just send something on Twitter if you have an idea to discuss, and then maybe we could bring it up on the next one. Jonathan, was there anything you wanted to say before we wrap up?
No, but I'll just echo the good part on adding the workaround inside of CacheCrypt. That lets people prove that it's valuable before we actually spend time implementing it in the protocol.
Awesome. You name anything before we wrap up?
No, that's about it.
All right. Okay, well, it's good to talk to you guys on this nth episode of General Bullshit, and we'll be back maybe another time, see what's going on next time. So if you have some proposals, something you think is interesting, please post it, and we'll do a proto whale tank, the BCH version of Shark Tank, and we'll just start talking. We don't need to have it too formal at first, but I think Bitcoin Cash Podcast is going to do something more serious. But in the meantime, yeah, let's just talk. And if there's other chips that are important, post something. Maybe we could discuss those. There's plenty of other things to talk about. So take care, and we'll talk with you again. Thank you, everyone.